good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. Wherever you are, thank you for being here. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach and author of the fabulous book, A Life to Die For. This is episode 182, and today we're going to be talking about overcoming self-sabotage. Now, self-sabotage is something that probably most of us don't want to admit, but it's a far more common situation than many of us might believe. If you've ever engaged in behaviors such as procrastination, comfort eating, compulsive shopping, or even self-medication, there's a pretty good chance that you have sabotaged yourself in some way, even if it was done totally unconsciously. Almost everyone does something at one time or another that is potentially damaging to his or her well-being. But if it becomes an unconscious habit, as happens to so many people, then it can really mess up your life. So in this episode of Life Mastery TV, we're going to look at this topic in quite some detail, I hope anyway. And to help me in this quest, I've invited a mindset strategist to join me. My guest believes that, quote, we are not meant to stay where we are in comfort. We are meant to grow, evolve, persist, thrive, and develop strength and courage to create a life of abundance and contribution, unquote. And she proves this on a regular basis by helping people out of their internal blockages into the brilliance and truth of who they really are. So please welcome the brilliant and delightful Melissa Jirovec to our program today. Welcome, Melissa. I hope you can come on camera here.
There we go.
There
Hello.
she is. All right. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm kind of excited about this conversation because I think at one point in my life I was a real expert at self-sabotage, and I've had to do some work to get around that. But I know that there are still little parts of me that, that insist on holding me back in one way or another. So I'm really looking forward to learning from you and to find out more about some of your wonderful tools for breaking this habit.
I mean, I think we all deal with it on some degree, but I feel like I could call myself the queen of self-sabotage at one point. And so everything that I have learned on this topic has truly been because I've been there. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So I'm excited to chat about that with you today.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and that's the way I usually like to start these conversations. I mean, I know that most of us who are involved in the self-help field tend to have gone through our own challenges in life that lead us into a practice of helping other people to deal with that very problem. So I'm assuming you mentioned that you call yourself the queen of self-sabotage. So I'm assuming that's where you started on your journey towards helping other people. And so tell us a little bit about, the dark side of your journey so we can understand more about you. And, you don't have to get like super vulnerable or anything like that, but just a little bit of your journey and how you got where you are now.
Sure. So to give you a little bit of context, young adult Melissa was a very shy, self-conscious person, to the point where, I had trouble in social situations. I had trouble talking with strangers. I didn't know what to say. I had a lot of fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of rejection, like all of it. I was afraid to make a move and make a decision because I was always afraid it would be the wrong one. So I lived in fear, constantly very stressed, very anxious, and didn't really understand why it was that I felt that way. Kind of decided, well, I guess that's just who I am. That's me. And then it took like a trauma to break me out of that. So I was a young nurse. Um, I was struggling in my career, and my husband ended up getting into an accident, and he suffered a traumatic brain injury. So At 23, I became a caregiver and had to become an advocate. And so I was faced with a situation where here I was previously not being able to use my voice, and then I had to. His life literally depended on me speaking up. And so I was forced to start doing that. And the more I started speaking up, and the more I started being in that kind of a situation, life stops. So you have time to think about stuff. And the
Right.
more I started thinking about stuff, I started figuring out, well, like, what is it that I'm so afraid of? I mean, this is scary,
Hmm.
right? And I started thinking about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to behave and what I actually stood for. And so bit by bit, as I practiced it, I stepped into my role as a caregiver and an advocate, but I also became a person who is now assertive and who is now confident and who knew what she wanted as I dived into figuring that out.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I mean, well, I'm really sorry to hear about what happened to your husband. That's not a good part of the story, but
Yeah.
it put you in a position where you had to look at your own belief systems about yourself and maybe unravel them a little bit and start looking at how you could change things. And that's often the way life happens, isn't it? We're going along thinking that we're doing, the right thing or whatever, and then some event happens, whatever that event might be, and often it's an unpleasant event that causes us to take another look at ourselves and our lives and maybe how we created this event or whatever else. Yeah, it's a process that we all seem to go through, and so bless you for doing that, and coming to the awareness that you deserve to have a voice just like everybody else does.
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe that the reason that we self-sabotage is because we are disconnected. So we're disconnected to ourselves, and or we're disconnected to our priorities and or we're disconnected to our desires. Like we're just there's something that's not jiving. And until we start to work on that connection, things are going to happen. We're going to be attracting situations, creating situations subconsciously, whatever it is. Things are going to happen until we start to rebuild that connection. At some point, you're either going to be forced to, or you're going to start to gain the awareness to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Um, it's You use the word disconnected, and I think that that's a good word to use. The way I describe it is, when we come into this world as young babies, we're completely open and vulnerable, and we are fully 100% still connected to our spiritual nature, the true nature of who we really are. But it's through a process of conditioning and teaching and indoctrination and education and all this other stuff that happens that we kind of learn that we're supposed to behave in certain ways. We're supposed to show up in certain ways. We get told that that's okay and that's not okay. And, we also know that, hey, wait a minute, that not okay thing that you say is something that I really like. It's a part of myself that I really like. And so what we end up doing is we end up fracturing ourselves. We're saying, wait a minute, mommy doesn't like that, so I have to hide it, you know? Or daddy thinks I'm bad when I do that, so I can't behave that way. And so consequently, we kind of put these parts of ourselves way back in the background, and then we start living an incomplete life. And I think that's the kind of disconnection that I believe you're talking about. And it's something that all of us, at some point, sooner or later, we're all going to be faced with something that requires us to start going and getting some of those parts that we put aside, to bring them back, to reintegrate them into who we are, so that we can deal with this situation that we weren't otherwise prepared to deal with. It's a pretty amazing process.
Absolutely. I mean, That's really what it is. It starts from birth. Like we are born and we don't doubt ourselves. We get up, we walk, we're not afraid to fall. We
That's
just
right.
we operate on instinct, right?
Yep.
And as we go through childhood, like you said, and we are influenced, we start to associate certain things with our identity. Just like when I shared, like, being shy, I associated that with my identity. I am a shy person. I
Right.
am not a shy person. I am a person who believes herself to be shy and who behaves in a shy manner. But your identity is nothing that can be changed. And that
That's
is something
beautiful.
that can be changed, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so when our idea of who we are is not accurate, when it's based on things that can be changed, that opens the door to self-sabotage.
That's right. That's right. I think, you've hit on something that I think is very, very important and something that I teach all the time. There is nothing, I believe, nothing more important than knowing the truth about who you really are.
Mhm.
And that takes work because, as you say, we've been conditioned from a very young age to believe ourselves to be a certain way based on how people reflect their perspective back to us. And so we learn uh, that, well, as you say, I am shy. And so you have this identity statement built into your consciousness that you're probably not even aware you're doing. I am shy. I am shy. That's a belief system, but it's not really true. The moment you say it now out loud, you think about it and say, wait a minute, is that really true? And then you rephrased it for yourself. I am not shy. I am just a human being who happens to experience this aspect of shyness from time to time. That's a different thing than saying I am shy. And you're absolutely right. We put all kinds of identity statements, I am David. I am a man. I am an author. You see how we associate, when we say I am, we are identifying with it. And the truth is, we are none of those things. We are divine, magnificent, spiritual, unlimited beings of light and love who happen to be having a human experience of limited time duration. And during that limited time duration, we get to have all these different roles and opportunities and experiences. And that's what it's about. We misidentify ourselves and forget the truth about who we really are. And if we can regain that truth, get back to it, everything else just kind of fades away and you begin to see just how amazing you really are.
Yeah. Absolutely. And really reconnecting with your identity is kind of a two-part process. One where you discover that truth that you're talking about, and another one where you get to reach adulthood and you get to just decide who you want to be. You get to create that identity. So a
That's
lot of
right.
times, people get stuck here with, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. I have to discover it. Like they're just going to wake up and go for a walk one day and it's all just going to, be a download. But the other side of it is that you have to decide. So, if you were raised around poverty, then once you become an adult, you get to decide, I am going to be a person who breaks that generational pattern. I am going to be a person who experiences abundance and wealth. Like you have to make that decision for yourself. And you
Right.
get to create your identity around those decisions. You get to decide who you are. So part of it is that discovery. And the other part is that decision and creation that you
Exactly.
get to embark on.
Yeah. Lordiel says, I am me.
Right.
Exactly right. And, this is something that I have been thinking about a lot. We talk about truth as a concept, and a lot of people have mistaken ideas about what absolute truth is versus relative truth and all that kind of stuff. And I have come to the conclusion that there really is only one true statement. And that statement is, I am. Nothing more. Everything else emanates out of that. The I am is really the only complete truth that requires no further explanation. Why do you think that in the Bible, God claims that as his name? I am that I am. And it's really interesting to me that when I accept that is the only truth, everything else emanates from that, then I can begin to see, because I am, then I create. And everything I create is a reflection of who I am. So, to get back to your point about choosing who you want to be in the next moment, I think you're absolutely right. I have a choice about how I want people to experience me. I have a choice about whether I show all aspects of myself or not. And it's really up to me to decide whether it's time to show this person this aspect and that person a different aspect, or if I'm just going to be open to the whole world, or what's going to happen. So all of these things are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in figuring that out that you start to either shed the self-sabotaging habits or just identify them so that you can make that change. So if you say in your mind, okay, I'm confident, but in the subconscious mind is still, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, uh, et cetera, et cetera, your behavior is going to reflect the subconscious belief. It's not going to reflect what you're telling yourself in the conscious mind,
Thank you
right?
so much. That is absolutely right. And this is exactly the problem with the power of positive thinking.
Yeah.
This is exactly the problem. And one of my teachers said to me, you have to start from tabula rasa. You have to clear the slate before you can start putting on new stuff. It's like, your old subconscious belief is the stone in the ground that you're trying to plant a flower in. If you don't get rid of that stone or whatever else is in that soil, that the flower is simply not going to grow. What's going to grow are the weeds. And the weeds will continue to grow until you get rid of the stuff that attracts the weeds. And the only way you could do that is to become aware of it. So you have to understand that your subconscious beliefs are the rocks and the weeds and everything else, and you have to pull them out by the roots. You have to find the root, say, where did this come from? And you have to heal that whatever that issue is, so that the underlying disempowering, limiting belief can be healed and removed, and then make space for the self-empowering belief to start to grow and thrive.
Yeah. That's absolutely it. We can't get rid of something that we don't know is there. And so you have to, one of the ways that I like to suggest is if you sit down with a journal and you take a pen and you write down I am, and you just let things come out. Just descriptive words about yourself, what comes out. And you start to really identify, what do I believe to be true about myself? Then you can identify where you're sabotaging yourself, because if you are saying I am poor, then you're going to sabotage yourself when it comes to earning money. You are not going to earn a lot of money thinking I am poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you can identify that, then you can let it go. But you have to spend that time diving into your identity, like we've been talking about, making the time to really figure out, who am I and who do I want to be?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's very similar to an exercise that I teach. Uh, it's called the repeated question game, and basically it involves two people normally. But I like your idea too, because you could take the same concept, this repeated question, and so on your journal, you put on the top of the page, who am I?
Yeah.
And you just keep looking at that question, who am I? And write down the first thing that comes to you. Look at the question, who am I? Write down the first thing that comes to you. And notice how you feel about it. Don't just write it down and say, okay, there's an interesting thought. Ask yourself, how do I feel about this thing that I just wrote? Does it feel true? Does it feel false? Does it feel like I'm creating something instead of actually being something? How does it feel? And if you can do that, then you can begin to see that all of these statements that you're writing down ultimately are just fabrications of your mind. They are temporary things, and they may be true in the moment that you write them, but a moment later when you write something different, that first item might not seem so true anymore. And that's the beauty of this kind of exercise. So do it. Try it out. Get clarity about who you are.
Yeah. That clarity piece is huge because the more we understand about ourselves, the more we can start to take control. And the truth is that in general, we tend to think of ourselves as pretty helpless a lot of the time because we operate from the outside in. So we figure whatever's going on in our lives, that's got to dictate my behavior and that's got to dictate my thoughts and my moods. I feel this way because this is going on and there's nothing I can do about it. And so when we start to gain that clarity, maybe we're writing out that list of descriptive words and we're thinking, where did that come from? Why is it that I think I'm not very smart? Well, I did bad in math a lot, and my parents used to make comments, and it made me think I wasn't very smart. Or, why is it that I'm not very confident? Well, there was so and so in this place, and I always, whatever it is. But when you can start to come up with explanations of that, then you can be like, okay, you know what? That happened, and it made me believe this. But now moving forward, I choose for things to be different. I'm not in that spot anymore as a child. I'm an
Right.
adult now.
Yeah.
That clarity piece, right? Figuring out what is it that I actually want? What is it that I truly believe? What is my relationship with money? What do I believe about those kind of things? What have I been told? What have I been modeled? Really diving into, okay, this is where I'm at, but why am I there?
Yeah.
And how can I change that moving forward?
Yeah. That's great. I love that. And you know, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a little modification on the languaging. This happened. I came, and it made me believe. Well, I don't believe that something else can make me believe something. What I believe is that something happened, and unconsciously or consciously, I made a choice about it and chose to believe something about myself. And and probably it was unconscious. And because it was unconscious, I didn't realize I was making that belief. And I attribute that belief back to this situation here, but it's carried through with me all my life. I remember, as I was doing my personal growth work, a big part of my challenge was I blamed my mother for a lot of stuff. I mean, I really did. It was her fault that I turned out this way. She created this, blah, blah, blah. That was the story I had in my head. When I took the deeper dive and I started to understand how even at the age of 3 years old, I made a choice, an unconscious choice, that I had to rely on other people to tell me the truth about who I am. I made that choice unconsciously. I had no idea I had made that choice. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s, when the anger level got to such a high level and things just exploded, that I woke up and started doing the work and unraveled it all back to that time. Oh, yeah, I was 3, so I can be forgiven for making that choice when I was 3 years old. But nevertheless, it was my choice. And that choice influenced my life, not my mother.
Yeah.
And so you see, the moment I make that awareness and I make that connection and I develop that clarity, now all of a sudden I realize, oh my God, I've been blaming my mom for this all my life. Now I can come to some compassion and to some forgiveness and say, Mom, I understand that I made the choice. I see that, sure, you said what you said, you did what you did, and I believe you did that out of love for me. I can now forgive you, even though you don't really need to be forgiven, but I forgive you so that I am not carrying this stuff anymore. That's the beauty of taking responsibility of everything in our lives, even things that seem to happen outside of ourselves.
I like that. I like that perspective. I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, like I've always kind of put like when we hit adulthood or young adulthood, that's when we have to start taking that kind of responsibility and accountability. But that's a really interesting perspective. I like that. That's very empowering.
Sorry, my dog just heard something outside and he started to bark. That's why I
Oh,
muted myself. So hopefully he's going to settle down now. Yeah, I think it's a really, really important aspect. Self-responsibility is one of the most important things. And again, it's something that happens when we become clear about who we really are.
yeah.
The more clarity we can get and the more we can begin to understand that we're not just isolated, separated, unique individuals. We're all part of an amazing fabric of spiritual energy. And we all just happen to be having slightly different experiences. But ultimately, we're all the same energy. We're all connected. We're all one. And if we can realize that, then we can begin to see the whole world in a completely different place, or in a different way, I should say. And this can help us a lot.
Well, that's the power of perspective, right? And perspective is one of our higher mental faculties, and
Yeah,
it can be weak just like it can be strong. And
right.
so developing that perspective, that ability to look at things in a different light, I mean, that's a really powerful ability. You could almost call it a skill.
Right.
And so, I think that's part of the clarity process, right? Is understanding that just because I think of things a certain way doesn't mean that's fact. Just because I believe something doesn't mean that that's the way it is. That
That's
means
right.
that's what I believe. Just because I hold a certain perspective does not mean there are not other perspectives. And I mean, I think that just that awareness alone is so powerful, because if we kind of get tunnel vision on something and there's a disconnect, the self-sabotage, we're never going to be able to take accountability for that, because
Right.
there's always going to be something else to blame for it, as you said.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned the word blame, because as Sarah pointed out in her comment, blaming is also something we have learned. That's absolutely true. I don't think when we first arrive in this world, we're even thinking about blaming anybody for anything. It's something that we have to go through some experiences, and then we point the finger outward and say, you made me, you did this, it's your fault. That's what we end up doing. And that's all part of ego mind. If we could eliminate the ego mind altogether and just stay in our spiritual space, we'd never blame anybody for anything. We would just be pure love. But that's part of the human experience. We have these ego minds that help us to navigate the physical space, to help us to, make decisions and, things that are not going to hurt our bodies, that sort of thing. And it's useful in that regard. It also has other useful purposes, but ultimately it's just a tool. That's all the ego is. It's a tool. And if we allow it to run our lives rather than running the tool, you know what I'm saying? Let the tool run you rather than running the tool. Well, that's when disaster happens. And we're seeing this manifest all over the world right now. Ego everywhere.
Could that be a truer statement? I absolutely agree. And at some point we have to make the decision that we want things to be different for ourselves. We have
Yeah.
to be very solid in that decision. And then we have to have the audacity to act on it. Right? It's not enough to say that
Hey, are
we
you
want.
reading my notes?
Am I reading your notes? They were
Yeah.
absolutely fabulous. I made myself some little
Oh,
jot downs. Yeah, they were
good.
great. So
Yeah.
I loved that word. I love that word, audacity. I mean, like, it's my favorite word. And I think part of our journey here, and I love the way that you just put it, is to develop. Like, we could be adults and have it all figured out, and that would be bleh. But that process of discovery, and not just learning, because learning is not enough. That process of having the audacity to act on what we're learning, that is what creates the growth and our ability to love more and have a greater impact and understand better and do better. And so when we have the audacity to say, I'm in the habit of emotionally eating when I'm stressed, and I'm going to have the audacity to work on that, to laser focus on that, because that's something that I know doesn't make me feel good and doesn't align with me. And to have the audacity to act on it and not just say, I hate when I emotionally eat. I don't like that I do that. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
To execute on it, right? The growth that comes from that, from being able to do that, from being able to accomplish that, you can take that into all areas of your life now. And you can help
Right.
other people to do that. It's just an ever expanding thing.
Right. Have you ever noticed that when you ask somebody what they want, often they might give you couple of things that they're interested in, but usually the conversation devolves into something like, well, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, this is what I've got and I don't want that. I find it interesting that most people take the negative. They say, I don't want, but they don't realize that by focusing on not wanting something, they're actually creating in their subconscious mind a desire for that thing. It's the subconscious mind doesn't understand the not part.
Yeah.
It says, oh, comfort eating, here you go. It just keeps providing more opportunities. So what you have to do, you can't simply say, I don't want this. You have to ask yourself, all right, if I didn't have that, if that was gone, what would I put in its place? What would be there that I really do want? That's how you shift it. You don't just simply have to come up with a thing and say, well, I want this. I mean, we all want world peace, don't we? Come on. What do you want in your life?
Yeah.
Well, I want, what do I want in my life? I want honesty. I want integrity. I want truthfulness. I want love. I want connection. Those are things that I want in my life. So how do I go about creating those? And that's the issue, I think. If I could focus on the things that I really want to attract into my life and start taking inspired action to bring those in, as you say, being audacious about it, I like that, then what'll happen is the things that I don't want will just slowly disappear. They'll just kind of go away. There's no longer any interest in those things because you're focusing your attention on something you do want. It's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, focus is so important. It's kind of like if you are in a forest in the middle of a snowstorm and you keep thinking, I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to freeze to death. You're going to stand there and you're going to freeze to death. That's what's going to happen to you. But if you're thinking, how do I get warm? Well, now you're thinking bonfires and you're thinking shelter and you're thinking, so you can't get what you want until you start thinking about what you want. Like it
Exactly.
can't come to you.
Yeah.
And I liked your examples because we have to get really specific with this. And you gave very specific examples. It's not enough to say, I want to feel good. Like, no. How do you want to feel very specifically? It's not enough to say, I want to have good relationships. No, what is it in the relationship that you want? It's not enough to say, I want more money. How much money do you want? How many dollars do you want? Right? We have to get really specific because if we're so vague, I want to be healthy. Healthy is a very broad term. Like,
Right.
what is it? What is it? What aspect of your health do you want? Is it that you want to improve your mental health? Is it that you want to improve your physical health? Is it that you want to improve your spiritual health? Like, what is it that you want? And until we figure out very specifically what we want, then the universe is just throwing all kinds of stuff. It's like, maybe you want this, maybe you want this. I don't know. Let me know when you know.
Yeah.
Right? Like we got to be very specific in what it is that we want or we're going to sabotage it.
Yeah. Sarah makes a great comment here. She says, I was brought up with, quote, I want, doesn't get. In other words, this was something that she heard from, I don't know, her parents or grandparents, whatever. And my grandfather was kind of like that. He would say things of a similar nature. And so I get, if you're constantly being told, I want, doesn't get, then if somebody actually asks you what you want, you're going to start saying, as Sarah points out, nothing. What do you want?
Yeah.
Nothing.
That is so
I'm not
common.
going to get it anyway, so might as well get nothing. And that's really sad that we get to that place where we think, oh, I'm not going to ask for anything because I never get what I want. And that, you see, what's also happening is a new belief system is coming into play. I never get what I want. And if you believe that you never get what you want, then believe me, you're never going to get what you want. It's funny how beliefs work. So we have to learn where our beliefs are, what they're actually telling us. And this is why your exercise, the writing I am exercise, could be transformed into another one, I want exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Creating a want list.
right. And now I personally, I'm a little nervous about using the word want, because word want implies lack. And it isn't really that you lack it. It's just that at the moment you're not experiencing it in your life. And if you want, you can choose it. So perhaps using the word I choose, like I was talking about truth and honesty and integrity and stuff, I choose those things, and I welcome them into my life rather than saying I want them.
Right.
So, and the truth of the matter is anything that we want is actually right there for the taking anyway.
Yeah.
It's just a question of choosing it. So
yeah, absolutely.
now, I wanted to ask you. Now,
Yeah.
we kind of went by this a while back, but I had it in my mind to ask you, and I completely forgot. But now it's back in my mind. So, you talked about a number of self-sabotage habits that people might experience. Can you maybe describe a few of those? I think I mentioned a few at the beginning of the show. But what's your experience? What sorts of things do people engage in that are, clearly examples of self-sabotage?
I think one of the most common ones is procrastination. So we'll decide that we want to do something, that we're going to do something, and then just put off getting started. A lot of times I find decision is like the biggest procrastination there is. Like you'll be sitting around at the family. What do we want to have for supper? I don't know. What do you want to have for supper? I don't know. What do you want to have for supper? Like somebody just decide what you want to have for supper, right? But nobody wants to put a suggestion out there because they're afraid it's going to be rejected. And
Right.
so we will procrastinate just making a decision on how we want to move forward, and then or we'll make the decision and we'll procrastinate getting started, or we'll get started and we'll procrastinate really diving in when it's starting to get a little bit more intense. I think procrastination is probably the most common thing because there are so many distractions that procrastination is so easy,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And avoidance is kind of the other side of that coin. Either you procrastinate and you put it off, or you avoid it altogether and just don't even go there. So I know when I started my business, I didn't truly believe I could be a business owner. I was coming from a nursing background. Who am I to be an entrepreneur? All of that limiting belief stuff started to come into play. So I started to avoid my business. I would just, oh, I have to take my husband to the grocery store, and this is coming up and that's coming up. And by the end of the day, oh, I was busy. It just didn't happen. And, when we start procrastinating and avoiding, all of a sudden our priorities shift. And what we said was important is no longer important.
Right.
So I find those two are probably the biggest ones. And then we also see stuff in terms of our health. So, for example, we'll say, my health is really important to me. But then when we're stressed, we don't look for the root cause of it. We don't look to work on the root cause of it. We start symptom treating. We start doing the baths with the face masks, but then we're going back to the boss who treats us badly the next day and nothing is changing. Um, Health is another big one in terms of, I have wounds or trauma, but I don't want to start the healing journey. I don't want to ask for the help, right? That's self-sabotage
Right.
because you're suffering with that. And there's all different kinds of reasons that can come into it, but at the end of the day, you're sabotaging your ability to move forward with better health. We do
Yeah.
that with our basic needs. We do it with all of those things. Typically, the things that are the most important to us scare us the most because the things that we want are gonna be hard to acquire. And so that's where you see that sabotage either consciously, where we're making decisions to not go there, or subconsciously, where we're creating situations that are going to get in the way of that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we can sabotage ourselves for sure. And one thing that you hit on is something that touches me actually, because I remember, when I first started doing my personal growth work, the idea of going back and looking at old wounds was definitely not in my lexicon. It was not something that I would even have contemplated.
Yeah.
Why do I want to scratch these scars and start the bleeding all over again? I mean, that was the thinking in my head. And yet what I now understand, and so I totally empathize, by the way, and I'm compassionate with people who feel that way. I understand that it can seem daunting, and it can seem dreadfully frightening to think that you're going to have to go back and relive the wounds or the trauma that caused the wounds. But the reality is, if you don't do that, then what happens is those wounds are still festering inside you somewhere. They're creating all these negative beliefs and these dysfunctional and limiting ideas that you have that are keeping you from showing up more fully in your life. And it's not going to be like in my case. It really required a crisis for me to get to a point where I realized, oh my God, this anger and resentment has gotten over the top. I have to do something now. Now, hopefully people will realize you can do something long before that happens. I hope you do. But if you're like me, you might say, no, I got this handled. I'm gonna do it my way. Okay, you're right. You can do it your way. And when the crisis happens, that's when you're gonna finally have to start looking at this stuff. And you're gonna have to maybe take some deep dives, and it might be scary. But what I promise you is this: going back and remembering trauma is not the same as going back and reliving trauma. So just remembering it and then trying to separate yourself out and look at it from an objective observer perspective, and just see the event from outside and notice, how was little David or little Melissa engaged in that reaction? Who else was involved? What were they doing? What was really happening? If you can do that, then what you are doing is you're witnessing yourself, by the way, as a young child, and saying, oh my God, and you just pouring love into that child. And if one thing can heal, it is love. So if you can just bring love to your inner child and allow yourself to heal those old wounds, let me tell you something. The beliefs that went along with those old wounds will start to dissolve, and new beliefs will start coming into play. And that's really what this process is about.
Yeah. I mean, you pay a price either way, you don't get out of it. So you either
Right.
pay the price to revisit the challenges that have led to where you are today, to work through them and to heal and to move forward the way you want to, or you pay a price to keep carrying it.
Yeah, right.
And one of them has a nice outcome and the other, well, not likely. So it's really, what price are you willing to pay? Because you don't get out of paying a price, no matter what you might think.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Whatever you're carrying comes out in your behavior. That subconscious it directs your behavior. So whatever you think you're hiding, or that you don't have to deal with, it's coming out in ways that you're probably not aware of.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. This idea of you're going to pay the price regardless. You are going to pay a price. There's definitely a cost associated with doing the work, and there's a cost associated with not doing the work.
Yeah.
And the problem is the cost of not doing the work. It's difficult to measure because you haven't done the work yet.
Yeah.
And it's like looking at and say, well, if I don't pull out the weeds in my garden and I'm still expecting my flowers to grow, what's really going to happen? Well, we know on some level what's going to happen. But it's a little different when you say, well, okay, so I had this abuse happen when I was a kid. So what if I don't go and see a therapist or a coach or do some work on it? I'm over it. It happened so long ago. You're over it. Well, maybe you're not over it. And maybe the price you're paying might be in the way you treat your own kids, or in maybe you're as a teacher, the way you treat some of the kids in your school. Your behavior patterns are going to be influenced by how you were treated as a kid, believe me. So if you don't do the work, somewhere along the way, there's going to be a price to pay, and it might be even more egregious than you can possibly imagine. So my recommendation is don't delay. Don't delay. Give yourself permission to look at the truth of what's happened in your life, to look at the belief systems that you've created as a result of those things, and to heal that old stuff so that you can indeed blossom into the amazing being that you were meant to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it, is that, sometimes we get to a point where we just adopt the belief that we were meant to be average, that things were meant to be not great, that like this is just life, it's struggle, it's pain, it's all of that stuff, when in reality it doesn't have to be that way. But
Right.
we have to work on ourselves to change that.
Yeah.
And I was doing a podcast with someone one time and they were asking me, I feel like there's so many problems in the world, and how do I make a difference? It doesn't feel like I can do anything to fix any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just the truth of the matter is that every time you work on yourself and you grow yourself and you develop yourself, you're impacting so many people. Like it's for you, but it's also influencing everybody else. And that's ripple effect, right? And so when we work on that subconscious, on our beliefs and our habits, everybody is affected. And that's such a beautiful thing. That's how we have an impact on the world, is we develop and
Exactly.
heal ourselves. That's our power.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great line. It reminds me of, the statement attributed to Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the
Mhm.
world. And that's exactly what he meant. You may not be able to change the world externally. You may not be able to directly improve situation as that might be true. And it might also be true that you were meant to suffer for now, or up to now. It doesn't mean you're meant to suffer the entire life. That's your choice. So if you want to change the world, start in here. Start in
Mhm.
here. Find out what's really going on in here. Heal those old wounds. Bring some love and compassion and forgiveness to yourself. And believe me, that's going to, as you say, it's going to ripple out and affect everybody. It's going to affect not just the world, but the universe. Love is a powerful, powerful thing, way more powerful than we give it credit for.
Yeah. Sometimes I almost wonder if it's not necessarily that we don't believe ourselves to be powerful, or that we believe there's so much hatred, but that we're actually afraid that we are that powerful and that our love can have that kind of impact, and afraid of stepping into that role,
Isn't
right?
that exactly what Marianne Williamson said
Is that what she
in
said?
her? Yeah, she made a speech, not a speech, but she wrote a book. What was it called? I can't remember the title of her book. Something about love. I can't remember, but it's a really beautiful book. And I think one of the early chapters, she said, our greatest fear is not that, and I can't remember the words exactly, but
Right.
it's really along the same lines of what you just said. Our
Yeah.
greatest fear is more that we are powerful beyond measure. I could probably find her quote somewhere, and perhaps someone on the show will grab it and post it in the link. But
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that is 100% true. We are more afraid of our power than we are of our limitations.
Yeah. Is that not why we sabotage ourselves?
Maybe.
Because if we're sabotaging and we're creating these results that we don't want, then we can keep reasoning that we are actually not powerful, and we don't have to do it, put ourselves out there and be vulnerable and get uncomfortable because we're not anybody special.
Yeah, right. And take a
So
look at this. Anna just, she responded. There is the quote by Marianne Williams. And I'm going to read it out because I think it's just a beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I mean, it's such a beautiful quote.
amazing.
And
I love
and
that.
you were channeling her, I guess, without realizing it.
I
So
think so. That was a download there.
that was
That
great.
is
Yeah.
that's
Well,
beautiful.
thank you, Anna, for copying and pasting that for us. I
Mhm.
mean, Marianne Williamson is a pretty amazing woman, to be sure, and a great leader in this field. And so it's good to have people like that we can look up to, you know,
Yeah.
and to learn from. So now let's just get back to this a little bit. One of the aspects of this topic that we haven't really covered is how do we make the healing of self-sabotage, how do we make that a priority in our lives? How do we make it like we've got to see ourselves as important, as Marianne Williamson says. We've got to see ourselves as powerful. And the question is, how do we get there?
Yeah. I think the key to getting there is prioritizing, figuring out what your priorities are. And the thing about priorities is that priorities are not what you say they are. Priorities are what you are actively putting first in your everyday life. Like if I take a look at what you're doing every day, am I going to be able to tell what's important to you? And with so many distractions and so much noise and so much chaos, I think one of the ways we self-sabotage ourselves is that we don't understand that we are not prioritizing what we're saying is important. And so if we want to get back to that place where we start to develop that understanding, we have to one carve out what our true priorities are and make that reconnection a priority. And two, we have to actually live that, which means
Mhm.
not saying that it's important. It means devoting time to it, devoting energy to it. It means taking the action that you need to take. It means learning from the people who are going to help you do that. Maybe finding support systems that are going to help you do that. Maybe connecting with healers, professionals, whoever it is that can guide you on that journey. Maybe finding communities where you can immerse yourself in that. But
Mhm.
what are you prioritizing is really about what are you doing on a regular basis? And it has to be a priority if anything is going to change.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I could have a list of things that are high priority to me, but ultimately, if you watch my behaviors, you could tell which ones of those items on my list I'm actually practicing. That's a very, very good point. The other thing is, I think, so we started off talking about identity and how we have to get clear about who we really are. I think that's an important piece. As part of becoming clear about who we really are, another aspect that seems to automatically kind of fall out of that is understanding why we're here, and or at least having you know who I am is this. I see myself now as a divine, magnificent being of light and love, and I see everybody that way now. Why am I here? Well, I know now that my purpose has to do with helping people to know the truth about who they are. I know that because I've gone through the challenges myself. Now, your purpose is slightly different, but it's still going to be similarly aligned with who you are, right? And that's the whole point. If you can understand your purpose in relationship to who you really are, then you can begin living your life according to both of those things. And that's where integrity comes into play, in my mind. And integrity is really nothing more than a state of being in which your thoughts, words, actions, and emotions are all pointing in the same direction, and they're aligned with your spiritual purpose for being. If you live your life in that way, then your priorities will become clear. You know, you will be able to say, is this thing that I'm doing in alignment with who I am, why I'm here, and does it keep me in integrity? You see, and you can easily see when you have those tools available, you can easily see whether you should be doing something or not doing something. So, you know, you talked earlier about, well, I have to go shopping for my husband or something like that. I can't remember what you said. And I thought, well, you have to, or do you choose to?
Mm-hmm.
That's the big question. If you didn't believe you had to do that, is that something you'd be doing? Or would you maybe hire somebody to do that and focus your attention somewhere else?
Right.
On the other hand, maybe you might say, no, this is who I am. Part of my purpose is to help my husband heal. Part of my purpose, and that makes me feel whatever it makes you feel. I feel in integrity. I feel in alignment with my purpose when I'm doing that. So it absolutely might be something that you would choose to do, even if you didn't have to do it. That's the important difference, I think, that we all have to understand. So that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah. We have that choice, right? As we go through our day, a lot of the things that we think we have to do, we're choosing to do, but we don't actually have to choose that. I
Right.
know me and my dad get into this around tax season. He goes, I have to pay my taxes. And I'm like, no, you don't have to pay your taxes. Well, if I don't pay my taxes, I'm going to be arrested. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's your choice. If you don't want to be arrested, then pay your taxes, but you don't have to pay your taxes. Nobody's got a gun to your head, right? You don't have to do that. You're a free being. You can do whatever you want. Just
Right.
because you don't like the alternative does not mean that you don't have choice.
That's
And
exactly right. Yeah.
we have a laugh about it every year because we go through it every year. But
Yeah.
um,
No, but
that
I think you're right. And not only that, you say, well, what if I don't pay my taxes? I'm going to get arrested. Well, maybe that's not true either. You know, how many people do you know who haven't paid their taxes and who got arrested? How many people do you know? I don't know very many personally. You know, you do hear stories about tax evasion and all that kind of stuff, and some people do go to prison, I guess. But not everybody who fails to pay taxes ends up in prison, you know? So, you know, you've got to look at what is the reality and what is my choice in the context of that reality.
yeah.
And furthermore, is my choice in alignment with who I really am? So if you can keep those things in your awareness, then you're making your life a whole hell of a lot better, really. And you're probably setting a very powerful example for other people in the process.
Yeah. When I live according to my choices, I am powerful and I am teaching others how to be powerful.
Right. All right. Well, our time is just about up here, Melissa. I would like to give you an opportunity to, if you have any final words that you'd like to share about the whole topic of self-sabotage and how people can, overcome it. I think we've had a really great conversation so far, and yeah, there's been a lot of good stuff covered here. So what would you like to share?
Sure. There can be a lot of shame and guilt associated with self-sabotage. Especially if we know we're doing it and we see
Mhm.
ourselves falling into patterns over and over and over again. And
Right.
so one of the things that I think it's really important to remember is that the when we self-sabotage, it's because of the beliefs that we have and the habits that we have, but those things can be changed. And even though we've made those choices to create that programming at some point or another, we can always make the choice to change it. And so there's really nothing to be guilty or ashamed of, because we can't be guilty or ashamed of not knowing better. We know now. And all we can do is make the changes from that moment. And so I think seeing a pattern in yourself that you don't like is a beautiful thing. It's something to be celebrated, because that awareness is so powerful and it means the future can be different. And so I
Yeah.
invite everybody that if you can see things in ways that you're sabotaging yourself, celebrate yourself for that awareness, because the potential now for change is there and it's a beautiful thing. And you should be proud of yourself for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. That's great. So we're going to bring a lot of self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-love, self-awareness, and self-acceptance into the picture in order to help us move forward, and to honor the fact that we self-sabotage up till now, and we don't have to keep doing it.
No.
Well, it's been great having you here, Melissa. It's been an awesome conversation. We've covered a lot of ground here today. And I just want to thank all you people for being on the live presentation. It's great having you here and having you interact with us. And I just wanted to mention, Melissa has offered a coupon code for one of her coaching practices. And I will make that available on my website, so you can go there and pick it up if you like. Thank you all for watching today's program. I just want to remind you, you can watch recordings of this and every other show on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. I truly hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I'm sure, as much as I enjoyed sharing it, and I think Melissa did as well. In a few hours, you're going to receive an email from the Learn It Live platform asking you for a review or something like that. Would you please take about 2 or 3 minutes, write a little review, give us a 3 or 4 or 5-star review on this, so that we can encourage other people to come and watch these programs as well. And finally, I'd like to remind everybody about my life mastery mantra, something that you can take with you and practice every single day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. And I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you.